So I got a question for you. How's your handwriting? If it's anything like mine, it's a bit closer to the kind of fat texter that you might see scrawled on the back of the bus seat. Just spiky and illegible and completely no idea what is written when it's taken out of context. However, even my terribly messy handwriting, which did lead me to rewrite entire essays in high school because my teachers refused to mark them, that handwriting can be enormously powerful. It can help me organise my thoughts, achieve goals that I'm setting, and even deliver me from immense mental anguish up to a point. And that point was me needing antipsychotics. But once those drugs started to kick in, it was the writing, which in combination with a few other things, that really started to help me think about the world a whole lot straighter. It might be hard to believe, but it really is that powerful. My guest today has written, actually, an entire book which outlines some of the most powerful exercises you can do with a piece of paper and some pencils when it comes to sorting your catastrophe from your possibility, your fear from your foresight, and your fun from your fuck-ups. Tammi Miller is a certified practising counsellor based in Sydney. Her brilliant book, Paperback Therapy, is a fantastic collection of tools which can really help you if you're unable to get to your shrink. It's really great. She's fantastic to chat to. Thanks for coming in. Thanks for coming up.
Thank you.
I guess the big challenge of psychology is that you're going to have to scale somehow. Otherwise, you're only ever going to be able to make as much money as you can from seeing one person at a time. And there's only so many hours in the day, and then you've got to report, and you've got to write, and there's and plus for your brain, you kind of max out.
Yeah, there's a lot of admin.
You're lucky if you see 6 clients in a day and make a practice work. And so that's why it's $300 an hour. That's what it costs.
Yeah.
And so there's this upper limit to what you can do for your life, but also what you can do for other people, because the one-on-one situation of it. So scaling psychology has always been the challenge. And books sometimes are okay. Sometimes they're like, this is kind of dangerous without a bit more knowledge. Why did you go, I'm going to have to do this. I'm going to have to get down on pen and paper.
Yeah. You hit it on the head more so when you said $300 is bloody expensive for therapy. And that is the reason, really.
Yeah.
I have mental health conditions myself. And when I was struggling, I was also struggling financially. And I decided that I would rather pay my rent than see a therapist.
Aha. And how did that work out?
Look, it's great. I paid the rent, but what I did with that time was stay in the room that I paid for and cry myself to sleep for months because I couldn't prioritize the time or funds to see a therapist.
Sorry that happened. That's shit house.
Yeah, and look, I'm not alone.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
It was constant conversations like that, particularly during COVID, where I said it needs to exist some resource where I can give these therapy exercises that I'm already giving to clients and working with clients on, or that I will shoot to a friend who's in crisis and just say, please just try this as something else in your toolkit, where people can access it, use it in between sessions. And so that's why the book came about, because something else needs to exist when you don't have the time or don't have the funds to actually go and see a therapist.
We are profoundly fortunate in this country to have the mental health plan on Medicare, which is it still at 20 or does it go back to 10?
It's at 10
It's at 10
the
again.
moment.
All right, because it was up to 20 sessions, which is amazing. And that was during and after pandemic lockdowns, because the early intervention investment from the health system at that point does, yes, cost money, but way cheaper than acute presentation a year and a half down the track.
Yeah.
Because it was unaddressed at the time.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's just amazing. I've had my own experience with this stuff, but I'd love to know your thoughts and what you tell people. Sitting down with a pen and paper, how on earth is that going to make everything is shit? Nothing could make anything better because everything is terrible always. How can that possibly move the needle?
It slows us down, and I think it forces us to actually focus on this thing that we need to focus on. When you think about today, we are plugged in. We're getting so much information all the time from everywhere around us. There's mobile screens, there's streaming services, there's every kind of information input that you can think of. And so much of that is not consciously consumed. And so when we have to stop and focus on a page and write down answers to prompts, it really helps us to focus in on ourselves in ways that we don't really do otherwise. Like all of those information processing that we get from external sources are really numbing us, really. And so being vulnerable on the page, which is also really good because it's not with a friend or a parent or someone who might judge you, is a nice first step to kind of understand yourself a little bit better. This book is not for when you're in crisis and you're in a fight or flight or fawn response. This is for those moments in between to better understand yourself and to help yourself deal with when you start to feel yourself edging towards that. But in terms of when you're actually in crisis, that's where you need to tap into professional support, or hopefully someone else who maybe has read the book sees you and says, I think we need to get you support right now.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
My first experience with this kind of stuff was when I learned cognitive behavioral therapy nearly 25 years ago now. And I didn't want to believe that writing some stuff down in some columns would change how I felt on the inside. What is going on for us? Like, is there a different pathway that the signal or the processing goes through when we're writing it down for us to be able to rephrase something? Like, truly, honestly, on the way here, there was a guy who drove across the bicycle lane without looking, and my back wheel did this full skid, and I'm like, really? Now, I could have, in the past, responded with aggression. I don't know, fuck you. And so I was just like, it's okay, man, I get it. And I kept going. Now, that's because I've practiced that a lot, not responding with, anger, which is something that happened earlier on in my life. Why does writing it down give you the ability to subvert that instant kind of thought pattern or that instant kind of reaction, the habitual reaction that we might have?
Because you are writing at a slower pace. So when you think, we think really fast, but when you write, you need to only think as fast as your pen can go. So it allows you to really take it in. And usually most of us will read back. The exercises usually ask you to read back on what you've written. And it's like when we study for exams, or if you study at school, it's always write it out by hand rather than typing it or just rereading it, because that way it's going to sink deeper because you are slowly processing what it is that you're writing. And also there's a sense of, do I understand what I'm writing, because you have to read it back.
The research around writing down how we feel about a moment is, you almost can't believe it could be true. It's like a fairy story, particularly in the treatment of things like, PTSD or, unprocessed trauma or something that might have happened even a very long time ago. The research between a focus group, I might be getting it not quite 1,000% right, but the difference between the control group who were just told to recall this moment, and then the, what do you call not control? I don't know, the experiment group, to recall a moment that was difficult, write down a page, and then literally never read it again. Never read it. Throw it away even. Yeah. Delete the file. And then a month later being asked how they felt when they recorded this thing, the first group was like, still terrible. And the second group was like, not so bad. Yeah. What's happening in our brains?
It's getting it out. It's purging, right? So you are putting it down. You have to make meaning of an experience. And when we do that just in our brains, we can sort of, circulate and sort of get kept up in it. And that's where we get spiraling and anxiety. But if you're actually writing it down and you have to think of sometimes structuring a sentence or thinking a bit deeper there, then it really is around meaning making. And this is why I love narrative therapy so much, because it's your experience. But you can then get it out of your brain, not have to worry about it anymore, and move forward because that has been processed.
Right. So I was very lucky to get an early copy of your book, and it arrived with most wonderful stationery.
Yes, they do a great job over there.
It was great. It was really good. And I very much, most of the exercises I have seen before. Yeah. And I wonder, is it like magicians when they get, don't tell them how we saw the lady in half, you're going to blow it for everyone. Like, do other psychologists say like, hey, Tammi, come on, keep a lid on this one?
Yeah, honestly. You know what? That was actually a really big fear when I pulled this together, that I would get a bit of pushback from the industry. But I think the key is that this is not a substitute for therapy. This is something in between. And there's a huge section at the back around how to actually seek professional help, because this isn't for everyone. But also, I just feel like the more that we improve people's mental health literacy, the better the world. And I really don't think that you're in it for the right reasons if you are a psychologist or counsellor who is like, let's gatekeep this information a little bit.
What does mental health literacy mean for you? Let's kind of explore what, because some people might be thinking, well, I know what's going on.
Yeah. I mean,
what does mental health literacy look like?
For me, it's about self-education, but also educating about those around you and realising that there is a lot of stigma out there and breaking that down into facts, which is ironic because a lot of the book is around separating facts from feelings, and that's really what this mental health literacy piece is about for me.
It's really hard to understand just because I think it's not real, just because I feel it's not real. Hang on, what?
Such that it's the takeaway from therapy ever, I feel like.
One of the things you talk about in your book is Socratic questioning, which I'm very fortunate to have learned from a very clever person. Say I came to you, all right, and you asked me how am I doing. I was like, this fucking guy in a white, it's always a white you, Tammi. Guy in a white you, cut me off. Why cycle, mate? He hates all cyclists. How would you use Socratic questioning to kind of de-escalate that situation and perhaps help me think differently about what might happen and perhaps even change how I react? Let's say I did get very angry and slap my hand on his bonnet or something and shout at him.
Yeah.
Post it on YouTube and be angry, shame him publicly,
Yeah.
which many cyclists do. I'm not saying it's a great idea. I think it's a terrible idea, but it does happen. Say if I, showed up at your office, how would you use Socratic questioning to kind of break that down?
Yeah, so Socratic questioning is essentially prompts to separate those facts from feelings. So it would be about asking, what evidence exists that this was personal to you? Do you...
I could tell by the way he looked at me.
Yeah, okay. But do you think that maybe he just saw you at the last moment, or do you think that it was personal and he was like, there's Osher, I'm going to go aim for him?
They always cut me off, because they, the last guy said, I always give way to you guys, and now, you are taking up the lane. People hate cycling. People, he's just I'm playing along here. Like all cars hate me. All cars hate me.
Yeah. But how many times have you been on the road where this has happened to you?
Oh, it happens all the time.
All the time. But you're driving safely and you have arrived here. So as a percentage, at what point of time, or how many times has this happened to you in the entire time that you've ever been on the road?
Okay, probably less than one.
Yeah. So maybe this guy was just having a bad day.
If you're thank you. I appreciate you going on with my little improvised moment there. That must be really hard when you're dealing with people who have that grievance welded to their identity.
Yeah.
How do you start to pick at that?
Yeah. The best lesson that I've learned as a counsellor is to be compassionate. And with that comes the knowledge that people don't change every day. They don't change in a day. And so working with them to see themselves as they are is ultimately the best way forward. So if someone comes and is like, I am unworthy of whatever belief, or I don't have friends, or whatever that belief is that they have, it's about both actively, how we just did, and doing it quite pointedly, saying, no, these are the facts versus what you're feeling. And then just little glimmers of reminders throughout the session of, you just said that you had coffee with Laura. That is proof then that you have a friend, and just reminding them of those little things throughout the session.
You don't believe me.
Yeah.
People can get real stuck in this stuff.
People do, but I think it depends what kind of therapist you are.
Yeah.
But I think the more that you remind them in a calm way, and it's not so direct as well, you can say, so you had a good time with Laura. That's great. She sounds like a good friend, is where they start to just pick it up.
How can we tell if we're using our identity as the shield to stop us from taking responsibility for our part to play, including how we did or didn't act or did or didn't think about something?
It's kind of flipped. So if you think of it as using your diagnosis, and I'm air quoting that because there's a whole section in the book and conversation in the industry around what diagnosis is in today's social media world, but using that as a crutch for not doing things. So I like to think of just in humanity a difference between reasons and excuses. And I believe that a lot of people with conditions like anxiety or similar will believe that they cannot do things because of their anxiety versus because they are anxious. And when you personalize and internalize that into your identity, it becomes a lot easier to just be like, oh, I can't do that because of this. And you kind of close your life up a bit.
Yeah.
Whereas if you say, I've got anxiety or I'm experiencing anxiety, but I'm going to try the thing anyway, that just opens up like opportunities to you. So I think it's more around your identity not being so attached to this unhelpful problem, condition, your presenting problem for therapy.
Yeah.
So that you can work through it, which is about separating it from yourself.
Because ultimately, as you just described, then, hey, great, you got the diagnosis. You might even get some meds.
Yeah.
Great. You get to go and sit in an office and talk to someone.
Yeah.
But if you are still allowing your choice in your life to be limited, then you are nowhere from where you were when you first sought help.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's quite a barrier to leap over sometimes.
Yeah, and I think the differentiation of you are a person who is experiencing X versus you are a person with X, when you think about that, it's such a powerful separator. You know, you are a person who is tall is a trait that you have. It's something it's definite. It's a fact. And so if you talk about
not experiencing height.
Yes. Well, I mean, it doesn't quite work in that way.
No, but I know what you're saying. Yeah.
But what you're saying is, you know, it's a trait. It's built in you. You cannot separate it from yourself.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier to control something.
Yeah. But a tall person will still learn across their life. And I know someone, a mate of mine, 7'2".
Oh, wow.
And this person has been this tall since, I don't know, their teens. And this person has learned if I'm going to walk through anyone's house but mine, because their house is built for them.
Yep.
If I'm going to walk through anyone's house but mine, I duck.
You got to duck.
When I go through doorways.
Yes.
Therefore, they're taking responsibility for their condition.
Yeah.
And they're not asking everybody else. Not every one of you every one of your architraves has to be modified if I'm going to come work here.
Exactly.
They just
make the world for me.
You need to make the world for me. No, they take responsibility for what it is and they go through life.
Yeah, good. That analogy worked then.
You're welcome. You can put it in book 2.
Thank you.
No, you're just fine. There was a book, I'm not going to say it out loud, but there was a book that was even given to me and my wife by our celebrant. It was to do with languages. And it was given to us as if this is everything you ever need to know. And it's recently come out that, mate, the cohort of people that book was written about were these quite upper middle class white church people that had very few, if any, financial problems, and literally every family looked exactly the same. They all went to the same school, and it's this tiny, tiny, tiny little cohort, and that's not. And I've heard people go, he doesn't understand me because he doesn't do acts of service.
Yeah.
Like, he's been doing acts of service for the last 5 fucking years, but they don't look like it says here, so you've not seen them. So I'd like to think, and I wonder if, your take on this, is finding a commonality in values a more powerful thing to look for in a partner?
I know the book you're talking about. It's definitely been poked some holes in that one for sure. There are so many values. So purely let's play a numbers game compared to, say, 5 versus hundreds of values that are out there.
Yeah.
You're more likely to have a bigger human experience across those different things. I think, yes, you need at least some values to connect with a partner. I don't believe that it needs to be all of them. I actually think that could be a little bit boring. But I think if you have a few common values and more how you want to live your life, which is ultimately what values are, they're kind of a moral, even more than that, compass towards, as long as I'm living to these things, then I'm going to be happy. I'm going to be able to deal with whatever adversity comes for us. So things like family, if you really value family and you value parenting even, then that's a pretty good common value to have with the person you want to spend the rest of your life with. But if it's things like what you like to do with your spare time, you know, I really value creativity, for instance. My partner values nature. I don't so much. So I would say that's doable in a relationship, because on our spare days when we have time off, I will sit and read a book or do something creative. He can go outside for a walk, and we both get fulfilled in those ways, but we come back together in our shared values of respect and loyalty, etc.
And finding out what your own values are is, I found it to be almost like the source code for just figuring out what the fuck to do next.
Honestly.
It's really important when faced with choice points in life around work, around relationships, around who to vote for, around whatever. I was quite confronted the first time I figured out my own values. I'm like, oh, I'm not this kind of wild lefty thing that I thought I was.
Yeah.
And it was confronting at first.
It changes your identity, or like what you thought that you were putting out there, for sure. Yeah. The section in the book actually lists all of the values and then has what are you living to now, but actually what do you want to be living to? And those are often really different. And so then it almost ignites, this is what I need to change or what I need to focus on in order to be a little bit happier. Values are so interesting. I love them. They get a bit of a shtick in the industry though.
Why?
I think if you just say, these are your values, go and live to them, it can be a bit irresponsible. Yeah. I did some wonderful work with an alcohol and other drug company, and a lot of those clients were mandated to come to group session, often after jail time, etc. And we talked a lot about values around things like loyalty, which seems like a wonderful value. But then when it's not, when you're doing things because you want to be loyal, but actually they're
to the boys,
they're criminal, or they're going to put you in bad situations, you need to question what that value means to you.
I think the sooner that you could figure out that stuff, the better, because there's certainly choices that as a young man I made that were not in alignment with how I felt about the world, but they were in alignment with how another person felt about the world. But I wanted their approval more than I wanted to look after myself. And then I ended up in perilous places, of which I shan't name. But I'm not alone in that. I think many teenage boys go through that stuff. Yeah.
I mean, we haven't gotten into the gender of it all. The men in this situation with mental health just have this higher stigma associated, which is awful.
Let me ask about that. What is it? I never experienced stigma from anybody else. It was self-stigma.
Yep.
I was offered antidepressants when I was 25. I didn't take them until I was 32. When I got really, really sick and my doctor said, take these antipsychotics if you need them. I was like, well, if I don't take them, I don't need them. Ha-ha! Yeah. So I didn't want to be a person that took antipsychotics. Yeah. Similar when I got sober. It's like I didn't want to be a person that had to stop drinking. It was a self-stigma that fucked me up. It wasn't anybody else. Is that the case generally, or is it like, am I an anomaly there?
Definitely not an anomaly. I think when you step back and think about all of these role models, I guess, that we've seen through TV, through books, through just personalities, it's not the done way to not be tough and strong and a provider and fine if you're a male. And it's an incredibly scary situation to put your hand up and say, hey, I'm a bit vulnerable. I might need medication to function better. Or I'm having some really dark thoughts. I maybe need to speak to somebody. And we don't tell our mates that because then they might see us as weak, or, we don't tell our partners that because you need to be the head of the family. This is all very, hopefully decades ago, but I definitely think that it's still in our lives.
Yeah.
And even therapy, like the stigma around going to therapy is still there. The stigma about mental health is definitely breaking, thanks to things like your book and this podcast. But the stigma about, and I go to a therapist to seek support is still quite strong.
I do worry about the role of men and boys in Australia, because it's, who knows nobody knows what we're supposed to do.
Yeah.
Nobody. It's real hard. Do you notice that when you're in practice? Do you notice, do men come to you and say, I don't know what's happening. I earn less than my wife, and that's great, but I don't know what to do about it.
Yeah, I think it's the crisis with men that I see is more so around what the identity is. What do I have to offer?
Yeah.
I actually haven't seen too many clients in family situations, but it's the single men, single hetero men coming to me to say, I do all the right things. Where's the relationship? Where's the wife? Where's the girlfriend? Where is this? And they are, though, on that impenetrable area. I've done X, Y, Z. I've ticked all the boxes, but there's very little emotion in there until we sort of drill down to it. So it's almost breaking down the archetype of this is what it's going to be, and having more, here's that word again, vulnerable conversations around what whole men look like.
Yeah. I see it with our youngest. So we've got two, one's 20, one's nearly 5. And I see the stuff he does at daycare, and I see the things that we went on the tour of his school. He's starting soon. And I see the way they talk about emotions and feelings in a way that I never, ever, 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 ever saw, ever, through my entire schooling up to 17, not once. And normalizing that kind of stuff. And so I've got great faith and hope for him, and G as well. Like G's cohort is extraordinarily emotionally intelligent kids. It's the middle bit, it's the people younger than me down to kind of mid-20s.
Yeah.
Because we can only learn off our parents, really.
Yeah. And there is a massive disconnect between that generation of almost the internet generation. It's like, oh, cool, I get it. Like, I'm learning and I can self-learn. Yeah. And the parents above that are, no, this is the done way, and this is, you push your feelings down. Yeah.
Yeah, it's simple thermodynamics, all right? Pressure's going to escape.
Yeah.
Eventually.
It does.
If the vessel cannot hold, it's going to blow. Don't care who you are. In some way, it's going to come out. The energy will leave your body somehow. Okay?
Absolutely.
No matter what. So what would you say to people who may be, themselves in that kind of middle zone, who are finding them, they're doing all the right things, but it's just not working? Or perhaps parents of older kids who are looking, it's like, come on, man. Can you move out? What's going on?
Yeah.
What would you say to people in that situation?
I think just talk to someone.
Yeah.
And I don't mean a therapist. That's obviously great. But again, we've talked about the limitations there. But talk to somebody who might be in a similar situation to you. Talk to a friend and be open with them and just say, this is kind of what I'm thinking. What do you reckon? Do some light Dr. Google searching, do that one a little bit, but take it with a grain of salt, and then sense check it against a reputable source. And also just check like local sources that you can have a chat to. There's so many great, amazing, underfunded, lifeline kind of organizations that you can chat to for a bit of information too.
Incredibly underfunded.
Yeah.
For people in those situations who might be finding themselves in that, I'm doing everything right. I go on dates and I'm getting nothing, or I'm just going from transactional sexual relationship to transactional sexual relationship. And on both sides, there's not to saying that, men are the only people that can be in this still
Absolutely not.
kind of fortress of safety. Yeah. Yes, there's definitely women who will not drop a guard at all. And you'll get a version of them that isn't actually who they are.
Yeah.
With your notebook, with your pen, when you're sitting down, if you were to say, listen, I've written this book, Paperback Therapy, if you find yourself in this situation, here's an exercise that might be beneficial to you, what would you suggest?
I'm going through all of them in my mind. The focus on what you can control is really good, because that ultimately helps you to list down the factors that you're able to control and the factors that you aren't. So it can get incredibly demoralizing and just honestly exhausting being on the apps and constantly getting no's for some reason. But what you can't control how people react to you, but what you can control is how often you engage with them, or what else you can do to meet people, for instance, in that regard. If you're actually on the date and things aren't going how planned, or you're coming up against someone who's quite guarded, it might be just a chance to look back at the values and say, look, am I actually choosing the right people that would meet up with my values, or am I still in this other situation of picking other people that might not be right?
Yeah.
So it's so cliche, but doing the work for yourself to find out what makes you tick just eliminates so much noise for when you actually are out and trying to meet other people that have similar values or similar interests to your own.
There's someone in my life who I think they've had a number of short-term, shall we say, people that they introduce as their girlfriend. Tell me, they all look the same. A number of them have had the same name.
Wow.
Is there an exercise that one may do to sit down and actually kind of almost do a post-campaign report, almost to sit down and look at previous relationships and go, this is the person it was, and just maybe perhaps identify in the 12-step program I'm a part of, they talk about your picker's broken.
Yep.
Like who you're choosing.
Yep.
That thing inside you that thinks it knows what it wants is actually the thing that might be broken. It's not you or them. It's just this thing. Is there something that you can do that involves writing down that can help you kind of ascertain what that might look like?
I don't think this is in the book, but asking the question why could be the book. So this book ultimately could be 2 Post-its. One is...
Yeah, look, nah. We used to say, honest, back when we did Australian Idol, the whole reveal, because it was a performance on a Sunday and the reveal on a Monday, we literally could do the reveal in a 30-second ad break. We stretch it to a 90-minute show.
It.
All right, mate, come on. You go.
We won't show how the sausage is made. All good.
Always, look, yes, it could be 2 posters. That's fine. And it's better if it's a book. The posters you can sell it at live shows. That's merch.
There you go. Done.
Sell it as merch.
Well, in the notes section, grab your pen and write down this person's ideal person. So they always look like brown hair, really tall, really curvy, whatever. Then ask the question, why? Because I'm attracted to that. Okay, but why? Because my first girlfriend looked like that. Okay, but why? Does that matter to you? Because I had a really great relationship with that first girlfriend and I miss them now. Okay, but why did you have a great relationship with that person? Because she was caring. Okay, maybe that's the thing that you can go with next instead of just what she looks like.
Wow. That's what, ask why 5 times.
Just keep asking it until you can't ask it anymore.
Just keep going. Yeah, wow. I had to do that, and I've done it a few times I had to do it, I guess, in what's the word, in like essentially an autopsy of relationships.
Yeah.
And it really helped me identify like, all right, it's me. I'm the one who has been choosing things that they were fine. They were who they were. It's not their fault.
Yeah.
But I was asking people who weren't what I wanted to be something they weren't
Yes.
and getting upset at them for that.
Yes.
And that's not fair.
Yeah. No, not fair to either of you. Not at all.
That's not fair at all. I'm very lucky that my current relationship was a setup. So my current relationship, what the fuck am I talking about?
Yeah, so
my wonderful
just
marriage of 10 years.
Yeah, you just celebrated it.
It's funny, this is my current wife, Audrey.
Yeah. She's not a forever.
It's really
just
fun. And she says it too. She's like, this is my current husband. Or my future ex-husband.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really funny. I think because people don't know what to do with that. It's kind of funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hilarious.
Cute.
But it's important to kind of see, why is that? I went after this guy and I couldn't understand what it was like. Oh, he looked exactly like a guy that I'd been with years before that. Oh, it was nothing about nothing at all.
Yeah, that one's pretty common.
Yeah, shame.
Yeah.
We got to figure that out.
It's but once you do, it's like, oh, how stupid that I'm going after someone who looks a certain way. Like, it's fine to have a type, but if it's getting in the way of functioning relationship, maybe look at why.
But even why do I have a type?
Yeah.
Well, I would ask why 100 times in a row about type, because that's, I don't know about that.
Some of those things I think though are nice to knows and some of them are, oh, I need to change it. That's pretty bad. You know, you might just have a type because that's what you grew up with around, you know. A lot of people of Asian background in Australia actively date non-Asian so that they want to have that feeling of belonging into, you know, the new culture in Australia.
Yes.
And that is a one to dig down and say, okay, but why? Because you might be missing out or disconnect by your culture, and what does that mean in the wider scheme of things?
Yeah.
But if it's just, I like dudes with beards.
Like, no one could probably even believe that writing things down, pen to paper, could make you feel less angry. You know, we're told punch a pillow or, you know, do a boxing class or just go for a walk or walk it off. Like, no, sit down, write some stuff out. Like, how? What does an anger management strategy on pen and paper look like?
The getting it out is really key. So I think a lot of us just don't process what is happening and why we're angry. So if you just put it down and look, this isn't to say that you're not furiously writing and tearing holes in the pages because you're doing it angrily, but getting that information out and saying, this really impacted me, enables you to see the anger, see the hurt that is also in there as well, and try and make sense of it.
All we ever want really is to be seen.
Yeah.
All right? Love is attention. That's it. If you want the secret to any relationship, that's it. Love is attention. Or food, which is also attention. But, you know, the idea that I just want someone to see how shit this was for me. That's it.
Yeah.
But if you're writing it down on paper, are we almost giving ourselves that feeling without having to involve another person?
Yeah. I mean, like you said, it's being seen. So if you just have it in your brain going over and over, it's not productive. There's nothing happening there. There's no next step. Whereas writing it out and getting it out is the step that is, okay, I've taken that one step. What's the next one that I can do? So there's the process of getting it out. There's the process of what you do once it's out. There's the ritualistic thing where people might burn it if it's a letter to a loved one, or this works really well in grief too, where you write a letter to somebody who may have passed away that you didn't get to say what you wanted to, and then just don't post it. That was just your exercise. But it's just getting that emotion out in the best safe place because it's not to anyone, not even to your therapist.
I've been at funerals where people put letters in the coffin.
Yeah. Beautiful exercise.
Yeah. I don't know what was written there. No one's going to dive down and go, hang on a second.
Yeah.
Well, it's before the dirt goes down. You know, people throw notes down there. I've seen that.
Yeah.
But for them, who knows what it means? It might be, I had a great time watching the sunset with you that day, or like, you owed me $187 and he never paid it back, you motherfucker.
Yeah. But that would be a cathartic experience for both of those people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's fascinating how we can kind of, like, nothing changed. That person still doesn't have the $187.
Yeah.
The only thing that changes, they've given another part of their brain that's holding this thing a reason to let it go.
Yeah.
Like, oh, it's done now. They've closed the loop on something.
It's closure. Exactly.
Isn't that wild?
Yeah.
we have this other bit of our brain that we need to lead around like a toddler.
Our brains are toddlers. It's the why question. That's the question that the babies ask, right?
Yeah.
Tell us, why is the sky blue, but why is the car red? Like those are questions they ask. Our brains are toddlers. We just want to know why, and we just want to be seen, be connected.
And much like toddlers, if you give them a shitty answer or lie to them,
yes,
they'll eventually, just to get what you need to get them to eat the whatever it is or go to sleep or get in the bath, eventually that will come and bite you in the ass.
Yep.
So you may as well be honest.
Yes, so good. Yes.
It's true though. It's true. When you're in a relationship or you're at work or whatever and people are, kind of, I've noticed you've gone from eating, 1 pie to 4 and 3 cans of Coke. Okay there, mate? Yeah, fine. Like how can we use, writing things down to perhaps look at our own habits that may not be serving us?
For our own habits, there's a section in the book called Stages of Change, and motivational interviewing forms into that. It's really commonly used in addiction therapy and is essentially recognizing that you can change, but only if you're in a certain stage of change.
I'm very aware of it because of the experience that I've had in this space, but this might be the first time someone's thinking about this or have possibly heard it. When someone realizes, a few people in a row have talked to me about whatever it is that I'm doing, could be smoking, vaping, eating, whatever, philandering, spending money on nothing. To get from there to a healthier way of being, there are stages of change. You write about this in the book. For people who don't know, could you take us through those changes, those states, please? So
there's pre-contemplation, which is essentially I'm aware of it, but I don't want to do anything about it. I love vaping. It's the best. There's contemplation when maybe those people have said, hey, you vape a lot or it's impacting me when we go out because I have to come outside with you or whatever. And you're like, oh, maybe I should change. Maybe I'm all okay. There's action when you sort of do some research and start taking action to change. There's maintenance, which is where you've changed, you're good, you're ongoing, you haven't had a vape in ages, or you only do it on what the agreed boundary is with you and those people. And then there is relapse, which is part of the stages of change, which is quite interesting because you would think that's not a change model. And it's also like maybe it's quite negative, but it's really important that relapse is in there because it's a wheel. And so you ultimately then recognize that you can immediately go back to pre-contemplation and keep going. Just because you relapse doesn't mean it's over. That's not the end of the line.
And it's also important for people around whoever we're talking about to understand that relapse is
it happens.
A high probability. If various things at work hasn't been done, it can be real easy.
Definitely.
You just the right situation, the right football team winning something. That it'll happen before they even think. They won't even have a chance to think about it. But the windows are, sometimes open for a long time, and sometimes just minutes go by, and then like, no, I'm not going to call and get a spot at a rehab. Fuck you.
Yes. So true. And look, it's a wheel, but people can go any direction on that wheel for sure.
So when we're writing stuff down, when we're using our pen and paper, say we are in pre-contemplative or contemplative. What does that look like?
So essentially saying, is this enough of a problem that I am willing to change it now? And you might say, no, I'm totally fine with it.
If I'm an addict, of course I'm saying no. It's everyone else's problem.
And the unfortunate thing is sometimes it will take a big thing to push you into the next stage.
Those things can get pretty big.
Huge.
I only got a DUI because the cops are never on that street.
Yes.
It's not my fault.
And let's go back to Socratic questioning here.
It can get, I've seen a lot of it. It sucks having to wait. As the person who loves the other person, it's the worst.
And so this is where motivational interviewing comes in, which is essentially saying, what can I do to move you along? So you say that you are happy, and yet you said on the other hand that you might be happy with this. which of those things is more important to you and moving it across. And that's in the book as well, and is around, asking the right questions to help that person identify that maybe they're saying that they're happy and fine with it, but actually they could be happier.
If someone's thinking, I should probably explore what this might look like, where would you start with, say you've got 5 minutes before everybody wakes up. All right, set the alarm 5 minutes earlier. What's something that you think if you had just that amount of time a day, what would you tell them to do?
And they've never done anything before. Rating self-esteem is a really big one, and it's peppered throughout the book too, to really look inwards and ask yourself, like, how do I feel about myself? Because all of those things are layer back up to that. So literally just quick 1 to 10, do you hate yourself? Do you love yourself in the good way? And where do you sit on that scale? Because being that honest with ourselves doesn't come around often. And then I would do 1 gratitude prompt. What are you so thankful for? Or what's something that I love about myself? And then 1 prompt, what is something that I can work on to better love myself or better my self-esteem? Those 2 things put you in a really positive mindset that change can happen, and also allow us to reflect on not everything is shit.
Self-esteem is, again, it's a very 70s, 80s thing. It's led to a lot of positive things, led to a lot of not very good things. When it comes to building self-esteem, like when you said, what's one thing that I could do? What kind of things are we looking at?
Knowing the values is a big one, because it just shuts out all that noise and means that if something external is impacting us, we can just wipe it away like Teflon. It's easy. But then it is doing things and being around people and curating your input to reflect better choices for self-esteem. We talk a lot about social media and how it's, it can be super negative and you compare yourself to others. And, a lot of my clients are professional women who say, oh, I'm really inspired by all these accounts of people who go to the gym and who run. And sometimes we challenge that and say, okay, but are you inspired by, or is it something that makes you feel bad about yourself? Are you saying, oh, they're at the gym and I'm not at the gym, I feel really bad, and that impacts your self-esteem? So one of the very first things in terms of when clients come to me and say, I'm ready to do the homework, what can I do, is curate your social media by muting anyone that doesn't bring you joy. If you get that ick feeling in your stomach from doing or seeing something, again, social media or otherwise, time to eliminate that so that you can start to focus on what makes you feel good and then start to believe, to your point, that you are worthy.
The democratization of broadcast has led to many wonderful things, many not wonderful things.
True.
And we're recording this right after Biden has, like on the day that Biden has announced he's stepping down. So it's going to be an interesting couple of months. Speaking of your things I can control, things I can't control, that's a pretty good circle to start on. If you haven't yet, get on that. Because it's going to be an interesting couple of months for our planet. But algorithms figure us out pretty quickly. And you mentioned Dr. Google earlier. If we're starting to look at YouTube videos about, I don't know, relationships, or we hear the word narcissist and we think, oh, X must have been a narcissist. We're going to start to get fed stuff.
Yes.
And we're going to start hearing words that very much, how shall I put this, clinically defined words.
Yes.
That require testing and diagnoses to attribute to.
Yeah.
Versus when people say, oh, I'm just a little bit OCD. No, you're fucking not. You just like things tidy.
Yeah.
No. You can actually, you'll be fine if that isn't the way it is.
Yes.
All right? You're not. And are you ADHD? So I must be my ADHD. Have you been diagnosed? No. Well, go to the fucking test, man. When you hear people, and there's all kinds of stuff. Like there was that, what was that thing, the TikTok tick?
Yes.
That shit is fascinating.
Yeah.
And where does that go? The idea of mimicking behavior or taking a term that is really quite clinical and very, very specific and just throwing it out into the world and someone identifying as that. if we feel that we might, maybe I've got that, maybe that's me, what would you say you should do?
This is so common. So I think those communities and following those hashtags of, neurodivergent or ADHD or anxiety or tics, whichever, is fine if you are being really conscious about it and curious about it, because there's something to be said in finding your community, but it is absolutely not a diagnosis. And so they're really good to say, oh, those symptoms look quite similar to something that I'm experiencing. Maybe I should look into it more. And it's that maybe I should look into it more that is incredibly important. And doing so is going to a reputable source, going to seek a diagnosis from your GP, going to your parents if it's a teen to say, hey, I think this is something I want to look into further. Going to organizations, .orgs that you can seek proper information that is researched and referenced from. And that, I think, is also part of being a really responsible therapist on social media, is showcasing your accreditations and what organization you need to be a part of. So as a follower, following those kinds of people within that community, rather than just, I want to be fed everything that ever comes through with that hashtag. Otherwise, it's just going to be overwhelming. You'll start to see yourself in it. It becomes that identity and starts to change your behavior. How dare you not tell me
I'm not neurodivergent? I am. And then, yes, and then what happens? And then you just that's a slippery slope.
Yeah, so it can be helpful because it's saying, oh, maybe this is something I want to look at, but it's incredibly unhelpful if that is your only source.
Yeah, the idea that you want some sort of diagnosis or you want some sort of label so you can be different. I mean, I haven't eaten animals in a real long time, and I had this thing the other day online with some people. Vegans, man, they're the fucking worst because they're ideologues. And part of me is like, you're not in it for the animals.
Yeah.
You're in it because you want to be special. You want to be able to be cranky at other people. This is nothing to do with pig farms. This is just you feeling that you want to be better than everybody else. That's not it, man.
That would be a really interesting why to dig into.
Yeah, I just can't get my head around it. And I have seen similar since my, speaking out about all the various acronyms that I'm connecting, initialisms that I'm collecting, the OCD, the ADHD, the amount of people that I've interacted with who are self-diagnosed.
Yes.
And then when I ask them, it's like, okay, which psychiatrist? I can't get into any. Okay, how long have you been trying? I didn't really.
Yeah.
Okay. But it goes back to that whole reasons and excuses you said before.
Exactly.
It's like going through life just going, it's my ADHD. No, it's not. You're not your ADHD at all.
Yeah.
That's not okay.
Yeah, and these terms do become quite cyclical and quite sexy. It's, you see it a lot over the news. There's a lot around kids and school refusal and that being used as reasons or excuses or whichever it is. And it's just incredibly it's difficult because there would also be a difficulty to get in and get those diagnoses because there's a flux of people who are like, oh no, that's who I am as well. So
and this doctor told me I wasn't, so I'm going to go see the other one.
Yeah.
And they're going to see the other one and the other one and the other one. And they keep telling me no, but they don't know.
Yeah. And then you have to ask yourself, why is it so important that you have this new label? Yeah.
Yeah. I have a thing about it. it's not healthy.
It's not.
It's really not healthy. I got asked, and so I went and I did 3 days of testing, and it turns out I am not on the autism spectrum. But I absolutely went and checked because I was interested to know.
Yeah. And I think that, again, with the privilege piece of it as well, like it is so hard to get in and to get tests. So everything is case by case, but I agree. What we're talking about here is very much there is a trend of people just self-diagnosing because they see one or two similar symptoms on social media, and that's what they want to pick up as a label.
You don't want it. I'm telling you right now, it's like there's parts of it that are okay, and there's a heap of it that makes everything really hard.
Yeah.
And it's not worth the justification. And the medication makes you really thirsty.
Yeah.
As I have nearly emptied my entire water bottle. I can get through life all right, but man, yeah, you don't want it. But why is it so important to you to essentially democratize access to this kind of mental health knowledge?
Yeah, I think I've lived it.
Yeah.
I've been diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder and depression, and I've had 2 suicide attempts. And I do believe that the first one of those, if I had known a bit more what my feelings were and how to deal with them, that wouldn't have happened. And the second one was a financial situation where if I had chosen therapy, I was a therapist at the time. But when you are so in your mind like that, it's incredibly hard to see out of it. And if I had instead gone to see my therapist, it probably wouldn't have gotten to that point.
That's so important that you just said that, because it shows how distorted thinking can get.
Oh,
You're someone who has studied, who is actively a therapist, actively speaking to people, who says all day long, this is what you need to do.
Oh, yeah.
Your brain was reframing, oh, no, but that's not for me.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do that. But
Yeah.
you're unable to see the exact pathway that is clearly there.
Yes.
If that doesn't tell you that you can't use a sick brain to think your way out of having a sick brain, I don't know what does.
Yeah, exactly.
Because that's precisely it. It's so, our brains are so weird. Amazing, but man, I'm glad we're able to at least look at them.
Yeah, they like to play tricks, that's for sure.
That we have the awareness at least.
Yeah.
And training that awareness is really, really important. Which I'm bloody grateful for. When you're writing stuff down, how can that help you kind of understand maybe this is a bit nuts. Maybe this isn't actually rational. Why writing it rather than just sitting in your brain trying to talk your way out of it?
I think if you're doing it via prompts like the facts and feelings sort of Socratic questioning, then that helps us to see sort of essentially what is real and what might just be a narrative in our mind. And that is when you start to say, oh, okay, I think that's a bit of a disordered way of thinking. I should probably look at why I'm thinking in that way. Just writing it out, like journaling, probably not going to make that difference. But if there's a prompt or a bit of a direction that is given, that's where the therapy exercises really come in play, then that's a bit better, because it's essentially helping you to pull out the important information. And as it does that, you're reframing what those thoughts are.
Being able to separate, because we can get on a cascade once the neurotransmitters start firing, particularly the anxiety ones, they go so fast, faster than anything you could, the blink of an eye, you are now in this completely different state of being that cannot see the possibility or blue sky or hear the tweet of a bird or the giggle of a toddler. It doesn't exist.
Yes.
And you won't even realize you're there. That's the trickiest part, I think. And not knowing that can happen, I think, you mentioned mental health literacy. Not knowing that can happen, I think, was I think probably one of the more important things that all the kind of work that you're doing and I'm trying to do is just notice. Like,
yes,
the reason I wanted to do any of this, right, was when I had those first thoughts of suicidality, and I just did not realize how those thoughts showed up in no way that I ever expected. It was, oh, I'm a bit cold. I might put my jumper on. Oh, that'll be nice. That was it. It was about that. Oh, it'll be really nice when I get that jumper on.
Yeah.
Yeah. I did not realize that, how seductive these thoughts could have been. And when that happened, I was like, holy fuck, I've got to warn people, not in the psychosis warning, that was different. No, but like warn people that when it comes, it doesn't come like a big scary freight train. It's like, hey man, let me make it better for you.
Exactly.
Let me sort you out.
Yeah.
I've got just the thing.
Yeah.
I've got a hot pack on a cold night. Come on over here. It was that.
Yes.
And that we don't talk about that we don't talk about how seductive and convincing brains can be. how quickly our brains can take us to a place where the completely irrational feels completely normal, and anyone that says otherwise is dangerous.
Yes.
Is the rapidity of that is it's less than a week. It could be a night if you take the right drugs, or wrong drugs, depending on what you say. And not enough people know that.
Yeah.
Not enough people know that.
Yeah, I think that's so true. And I think even when that stuff does happen, to me, I was a teenager the first time. When that stuff does happen, it took me another 5 years to be like, oh, that wasn't just like a blip. She was down and now she's fine. That's something that you will consistently live with and need to manage and take the medication and do the work. Yeah.
Duck under the doorway.
Yes, duck under the doors.
But it means you get to go into a room with lovely people. I was like, I can't come in there. See, doorway.
Yeah.
Sorry, too tall, bye.
It opens up your life when you know these things and know that you're not alone. I think for me with the book, the health literacy is not just people experiencing it, but it's the friends and people who love the people experiencing it.
Yeah.
And at home now with my partner, we've got this Post-it note that's on the fridge, and it literally is when feeling sad, and a list of things that are almost my first aid kit.
Yeah.
If I am down and I'm feeling those feelings again, it is like immediately put me in a car, get me out of the house, go into the sun, make something, clean something. Like it's very much my first aid kit and it helps you to pull you out of that thinking.
I have a note in my wallet.
Good.
Thank you so much for coming by. I'm really grateful that you made the time to do this.
Yeah, no, definitely loved it. Thank you.
It was fun. Get the book. It's a good book. I liked it. You have to get your own stationery though. I got sent some nice stuff.
Yeah, Post-it notes and pens, highlighters, a must.
Mate, they're all over my house because Wolfie found the stack.
Nice.
And now they're just everywhere.
He's doing the work.
If the work involves, Dad, you can't touch that over there because that'll explode. All right, buddy. No, that's the work.
Cute.
It's fun.